Imagine being forced out of your first-class seat because someone decided you didn't belong there. Now imagine finding out the person they humiliated actually owns the airline. This story will leave you stunned. Marcus stepped onto the plane like any other first-class passenger. Dressed in a sharp suit and carrying a calm, confident demeanor, he clutched his boarding pass and quietly found his seat. The hum of the cabin filled the air, and passengers settled into their places, preparing for what should have been a routine flight. But as Marcus adjusted his seatbelt, he noticed the lingering stares from a flight attendant and, moments later, the approach of the pilot. The pilot, a middle-aged white man with a stiff expression, scanned Marcus up and down. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his voice laced with skepticism. "Are you sure you're in the right seat? First class is reserved for premium passengers." Marcus, taken aback, but still calm, handed over his ticket. "This is my seat," he replied simply. The pilot's eyes flicked over the ticket, but his expression didn't soften. "I'm going to need you to move to the back of the plane," the pilot said firmly, his tone making it clear he didn't believe Marcus belonged there. The murmurs from nearby passengers began, but no one spoke up. Marcus could feel the weight of the stares, the silent judgment. He had paid for his ticket like everyone else, yet here he was, being treated as if he didn't belong. As Marcus rose from his seat, he locked eyes with the pilot. He didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't demand answers. Instead, he gave a faint smile and said softly, "Let's see how this ends." With that, he moved to the back of the plane, leaving the pilot and the rest of the passengers to wonder if they'd ever see him again. What they didn't know was this wasn't the last time Marcus would make his presence known. Marcus boarded the plane quietly, blending into the usual flow of passengers. His sharp suit and calm demeanor made him stand out, but not in the way anyone expected. Holding a valid first-class ticket, he confidently made his way to his seat, ready for a smooth flight. The first-class cabin was pristine, a place where comfort and respect were expected. Marcus settled in, placing his carry-on under the seat and buckling in. But his presence didn't go unnoticed. A flight attendant gave him a fleeting glance, a subtle but unmistakable signal of discomfort. Marcus brushed it off, focusing instead on his upcoming business meeting. Moments later, the pilot entered the cabin. His eyes scanned the rows, stopping abruptly when they landed on Marcus. The atmosphere shifted. Walking over with a forced smile, the pilot leaned down. "Sir, I think you might be in the wrong seat," he said, his voice clipped and laced with doubt. Marcus calmly handed over his ticket, but the pilot's skepticism didn't waver. "I'll need you to move to the back of the plane," the pilot stated, his tone leaving no room for discussion. The words hung in the air, heavy and cutting. The passengers around them looked on, some whispering, others averting their gaze. Marcus' chest tightened. He could feel the sting of humiliation, but he kept his composure. Without protest, he stood up, met the pilot's eyes, and said, "Let's see how this ends." As Marcus made his way to the economy cabin, he wasn't just leaving his seat behind. He was silently setting the stage for a moment that would shake the very foundation of the airline. What no one knew was that Marcus wasn't just any passenger, he was the owner. Marcus had just settled into his first-class seat, adjusting his jacket and placing his bag neatly under the seat in front of him. The hum of the cabin surrounded him, blending with the quiet conversations of other passengers. For a moment, it seemed like an ordinary flight, until the flight attendant walked by, her eyes lingering on him for just a second too long. There was something in her look that made Marcus uncomfortable, though he chose to ignore it. After all, he had every right to be there. Then came the pilot. With a sharp, purposeful stride, he entered the cabin and scanned the rows of passengers. His gaze froze the moment it landed on Marcus. The pilot's expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable, a mixture of doubt and authority. Without hesitation, he approached Marcus. "Sir," the pilot began, his voice neutral, but with an underlying edge. "Are you certain this is your seat? First class is reserved for premium passengers." Marcus calmly met his gaze, pulling out his ticket and handing it over without a word. The pilot took it, barely glancing at the details before handing it back. His tone grew sharper. "I think there's been a mistake. I'm going to ask you to move to the back of the plane." Marcus frowned slightly, holding his composure. "This is my seat," he replied, his voice calm but firm. "I paid for it." The pilot didn't back down. "I'm the captain of this flight, and I have the final say. You can either move voluntarily, or I'll have to remove you from the aircraft." The entire cabin grew silent. Passengers glanced at each other awkwardly, some clearly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. No one spoke up. Marcus scanned the faces of the onlookers, searching for even a hint of support, but all he saw was hesitation and avoidance. It was clear he was on his own. Feeling the weight of the moment but refusing to lose his dignity, Marcus stood. He turned to the pilot, meeting his eyes with calm resolve. "All right," he said softly, stepping into the aisle. But before walking away, he added a single line. "Let's see how this ends." He made his way toward the economy cabin, each step heavy with the sting of humiliation. The whispers of the passengers followed him, a murmur of judgment and silent complicity. As Marcus sat in the back, his mind raced, not with anger, but with quiet determination. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Little did the pilot know, Marcus had the power to change everything. As the plane touched down at its destination, Marcus calmly collected his belongings and stepped off without a word to the flight crew or passengers. The sting of humiliation still lingered, but Marcus wasn't the type to act out in the moment. He knew there was a better way to handle this, one that would leave a lasting impact. After leaving the terminal, Marcus made a phone call. It was brief, professional, and to the point. "He'd like to arrange a meeting with the pilot of Flight 785, he said, his tone steady. On the other end, the senior operations manager of the airline hesitated but quickly complied. After all, when the owner of the airline calls, you don't ask questions. The following day, the pilot received an unexpected summons to a corporate meeting. Confused but curious, he assumed it must be a routine review. His confidence didn't waver as he walked into the sleek office building, his uniform pressed and his demeanor polished. What he didn't expect was to find Marcus sitting at the head of the table. The pilot froze, his eyes widening as recognition dawned. The man he had humiliated on the flight wasn't just another passenger. He was the owner of the entire airline. "Please, take a seat," Marcus said calmly, gesturing toward a chair across from him. The pilot obeyed, his previous arrogance replaced by unease. Marcus wasted no time. "Do you remember me?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. The pilot stammered, searching for words. I didn't realize." "You didn't realize what?" Marcus interrupted. "That I had a first-class ticket? That I belonged there? Or that I owned this airline?" The room was silent. Marcus leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Your actions didn't just disrespect me. They disrespected the values of this company. We pride ourselves on treating every passenger with dignity, regardless of who they are or what they look like. Yesterday, you failed to uphold that standard." The pilot tried to explain, but Marcus held up a hand to stop him. "There's no excuse for what happened, and there's no place for behavior like that in this airline." By the end of the meeting, the pilot's fate was sealed. But Marcus wasn't just focused on one individual. He immediately ordered mandatory diversity training for all employees, ensuring no one else would have to face the same treatment he did. This was more than personal for Marcus. It was a turning point for the entire airline. The pilot sat across from Marcus in the brightly lit conference room, a tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Gone was the confident demeanor Head displayed on the flight. Now, he looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat as Marcus fixed him with a steady gaze. The truth had finally hit him. The man he had publicly humiliated wasn't just a passenger, he was the owner of the airline. "Do you remember me?" Marcus began, his voice calm yet firm. The pilot opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. His face was pale, his arrogance replaced by unease. "I'll remind you," Marcus continued, leaning slightly forward. "Yesterday, you made a scene in front of a plane full of passengers. You judged me not for who I am, but for how I look. You doubted that I belonged in first class, despite my ticket, despite everything." The pilot finally stammered, "I didn't mean." Marcus raised his hand, cutting him off. "You didn't mean what? To humiliate me? To enforce your own prejudice in front of others? Or to undermine the very principles this airline is supposed to stand for?" His words were precise, each one striking like a hammer. The pilot's defenses crumbled. I made a mistake," he admitted, barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded, his expression unreadable. "Yes, you did. But this isn't just about me. This is about every passenger who's ever been treated as less than because of their race, their background, or their appearance. And it's about the responsibility we have to make sure it never happens again." The silence was deafening as Marcus let his words sink in. He then shifted the conversation. "This airline was built on principles of respect and inclusion. What you did goes against everything we stand for. I'm left with no choice but to terminate your position effective immediately." The pilot's head dropped, and Marcus continued. "But this is bigger than just you. I'm implementing mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all employees, starting now. This isn't just about punishing, it's about ensuring no one else faces what I faced yesterday." As the meeting ended, Marcus stood, signaling the conversation was over. The pilot left the room, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Marcus stayed behind, reflecting. This wasn't about revenge, it was about setting a precedent. His calm but decisive actions had turned a moment of personal humiliation into a turning point for the entire airline. It was a lesson the pilot, and everyone in the company, wouldn't forget. The pilot left the meeting room, his uniform feeling heavier than ever. Word quickly spread among the staff about what had happened. Marcus, still composed, began putting his plan into action. He didn't dwell on the incident for long. It wasn't about punishing one person, but creating a ripple effect that would resonate throughout the airline. The first step was immediate. Marcus issued a directive mandating comprehensive diversity and inclusion training for every employee, from executives to the ground crew. The message was clear. Respect and fairness were non-negotiable. Marcus personally oversaw the initiative, ensuring it wasn't just a box to tick, but a real opportunity for growth and understanding. The airline's leadership team quickly backed the changes. A statement was released to the public, acknowledging the incident and outlining the steps being taken to prevent such occurrences in the future. Transparency was key, and Marcus knew that by admitting the company's shortcomings and committing to meaningful change, he could rebuild trust with both passengers and employees. Passengers who had been on the flight began sharing their experiences on social media. While some admitted to feeling guilty for staying silent, others applauded Marcus' leadership and the way he handled the situation. The story went viral, drawing attention from media outlets worldwide. What began as a moment of humiliation turned into an inspiring example of how one person's actions can lead to systemic change. The staff began embracing the new training sessions, with many employees expressing gratitude for the opportunity to grow. Marcus' quiet determination had not only addressed the problem, but transformed it into a movement within the airline. A culture of respect and inclusivity was beginning to take shape, proving that change, though uncomfortable, was possible and necessary. Marcus had turned a painful experience into a powerful statement of change. The airline, once tarnished by the pilot's actions, now became a symbol of progress and accountability. Policies that were long overdue were implemented swiftly. Every employee, from senior executives to ground crew, underwent diversity training. Marcus ensured these sessions were meaningful, emphasizing respect and equality for all passengers, regardless of their background. The airline's public acknowledgement of the incident and commitment to change won widespread support. Passengers who had witnessed the humiliation firsthand reached out, some apologizing for their silence, others praising Marcus for how he had handled the situation. Media outlets covered the story extensively, framing it as a rare example of leadership driven by integrity. The result was more than just improved policies. It was a cultural shift. Employees reported feeling prouder to work for the company. Passengers noticed the renewed focus on customer respect, and Marcus himself gained a reputation as a leader who not only stood for justice but acted on it. What began as an act of public humiliation ended as a lesson in humility, respect, and the power of change. Marcus proved that even in the face of prejudice, dignity and decisive action could rewrite the narrative. Prejudice blinds us to the truth about others, often leading to unfair judgments that hurt more than we realize. Marcus' story reminds us of the importance of treating everyone with dignity and respect, no matter their appearance or background. You never truly know someone's journey, their struggles, or their potential to create change. One moment of judgment can cost far more than you expect, while kindness and fairness can inspire transformation that benefits everyone involved. Respect is always the better choice. Hit subscribe and check out the next story that'll make you rethink everything. Please note this is not a real story. It's a work of fiction only for education and entertainment purposes.